Okay, so we're going to start and just cover in chapter 10. You're going to work with matrices next year a lot, but what we want to do is just work with the operations with matrices, kind of introduce you to the idea of matrices, which is what 10.2 is all about. And because this is going to be something you're going to see on your SATs, and we want to make sure that you've seen it. So first of all, a matrix is a rectangular array of numbers with m rows and n columns. Okay, so this, and this is a row, and a row. So rows go left to right. This and this, these two are columns. Columns go up and down. Think of, a column of a building, right? It goes up and down. And so this has 3 rows and 2 columns. So this is considered a 3x2 matrix, okay? So again, you have to remember that rows comes first, so it's rows by columns. When you're adding and subtracting with matrices, right, you can only do this if your matrices have the same dimensions. So in other words, if it's a 3x2, then the other one has to also be a 3x2. They cannot be different for addition and subtraction. And what you're going to do is you're going to add and subtract the corresponding entries, and you'll put the sum or the difference in those same spots. And I'll show you what I mean. So right here, I know that this right here, there's 2 rows and there's 2 columns. So this is a 2x2. This one here is 2 rows and 2 columns. So this is a 2x2. And therefore, I know that I can add them because they're both 2x2s. Okay, so sorry, I erased that. So this is a 2x2 and this is a 2x2. So what I'm going to do, I know my answer is also going to end up being a 2x2. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have 4 spots, okay? Just like here. Notice I have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And what I'm going to do is in the upper left corner, I've got -1 plus 1 is 0. In the upper right corner, I have 2 plus 3 is 5. Lower left corner, I have 0 and -1. Their sum is -1. And here I have 1 and 2 with a sum of 3. And so that's the answer. The sum of that matrix is this one. And, again, you could do it without the lines. I don't really like having the lines in it. But, again, it's going to be 0. Whoops, I already messed it up. Sorry. It's going to be 0, it's going to be 5, it's going to be -1, and it's going to be 3. And that is the sum. So, again, I come to the next one, and I have to, make sure of what I've got here. I've got 2 rows by 3 columns. And this one is 2 rows by 3 columns. And because they're both 2x3s, then I'm able to do the work here. So I know that my answer is going to also be a 2x3. So again, 0 plus 3 is 3. 1 plus 4 is 5. And -2 plus -1 is -3. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 1 is 3. And 3 plus 0 is 3. And that is the sum. So again, I'm just adding the corresponding pieces. So as you can see, it looks complicated at first. When you first look at this, if you've never seen this before, it's hard to wing it and figure out what they're asking you to do. However, now that you've been exposed to it, I feel like you can answer anything, right? So if I go to number 3, notice that this is 3 rows by 1 column, whereas the thing it's adding to, this is 1 row by 3 columns. And guess what? This is a no solution. I can't do this, okay? I cannot do this in this scenario, okay? It doesn't work. So it doesn't work. It's a no solution, and I'm done with that. So a scalar multiple is when you multiply each entry by some multiple value, okay? And I'm going to show you how to do that. So, for example, here, we've got matrix, this is matrix A, and notice this is a 3x3 matrix. Here we have matrix B, which is also a 3x3. And notice it says find 3 times A, matrix A. So, again, it's like, think of it as like 3 times, and matrix A, again, is 2, 2, 4, -3, 0, -1. 2, 1, and 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 3 and I basically am distributing the 3 to every single term in this entire matrix. Okay, So my matrix is going to end up still being a 3 by 3, but I have to go and do the math. So 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 4 is 12. Then I do the middle row. 3 times negative 3 is negative 9, 3 times 0 is 0, and 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And the last one, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 times 2 is 6. And there's my solution for 3A. Notice the second one says, what is the opposite of B? Think of it as negative 1 times B, or you can think of it as just all the B terms are going to change their sign. So again, I'm starting with 2, 0, 0, 1, negative 4, 3, and negative 1, 3, 2. And so if everything is just changing sign, I can leave the original like that, or I could just come in here and do the math here, right? Negative, zeros don't change sign. This is negative, this is positive, this is negative, this is positive, negative, and negative. And there I have my new answers, okay? So again, I just had to change the sign of everything, because when you multiply by negative 1, that's all you're really doing. Zeros just stay 0, because negative 1 times 0 is still 0. Okay, and then the last one, we have 3A minus B. So again, right, I'm going to have to kind of adjust each one. Well, 3A, I already did it. It's that, right? So let me write that out. So I'm going to have a 3 by 3, 6, 6, 12, negative 9, 0, negative 3, 6, 3, and 6, minus, and then minus B, right, is the same as plus the opposite of B. And remember, this was the opposite of B. So I'm able to really just kind of write those in. So negative 2, 0, and 0, minus 1, 4, and minus 3, and 1, negative 3, and negative 2. And now it's a 3 by 3, and this is a 3 by 3. So I am able to add them and come up with my final answer. So I'm going to go again, corresponding parts. 6 and negative 2 is 4. I've got 6 and 0 is 6. And 12 plus 0 is 12. Go to the middle row. Negative 9 and negative 1 is negative 10. 0 and 4 is 4. Negative 3 and negative 3 is negative 6. 6 and 1 is 7. 3 and negative 3 is 0. And 6 plus negative 2 is 4. And so 3A minus B is this one here. So again, just be careful. Again, 3A, you're going to multiply the 3 times every term inside of A. Negative B is you're basically going to either multiply every term inside of B by negative 1, or just flip signs. And then 3A minus B, or plus negative B, right? Plus negative B is going to be the sum of those two. So multiplying matrices is where it can get a little bit confusing. You got to be very, very organized, okay? First of all, one interesting thing is that when you do multiply matrices via matrices, they don't have to be the same size, okay? So what happens is when you do it, right, you're going to see, like, for example, this one here, this is a 2 by 2. Whoops. This is a 2 by 2. This is a 2 by 2. And when I do my multiplication, I'm going to end up with a 2 by 2. It's the inner and the outers are going to help you to determine the dimensions, okay? The middles should be the same there, okay? But how you're going to do these is you're going to, there's an order to it, and you have to be very careful with the order, okay? So notice, again, this is a 2 by 2. This is a 2 by 2. And that told me that my final answer, when I multiply them, is going to be a 2 by 2 as well, okay? So I know the final is going to be a 2 by 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this row, and I'm going to multiply it by this column first. I basically have to multiply this row by this column. I have to multiply that row by this column. And then I have to go back and do this row by this column and this row by this column. So it's a process, okay? And the more organized you are, the better you're going to be at it. So when I do this row and this column, right, I'm going to start and I'm going to do the first letter to the first letter. So I'm going to do A times E, okay? So I'm going to do AE plus, and then I'm going to do this letter times this letter, which is BG, okay? So AE plus BG, okay? Then I'm going to go to the second column here, and I'm going to do the same thing. That'll be my right term. It's going to be AF plus BH, okay? So the first times the first, the second times the second, okay? And I'm going to add those. Then I'm going to go to the bottom one here, CD, and I'm going to do EG again. So you probably already get the hint. It's going to be CE plus DG. And then I'm going to go to the last one, and it's going to be CF plus DH. And whatever the product of each one and then the sum, those are going to be the 4 values that you're going to put in that space, okay? So again, it's a pattern. You do have to memorize that pattern, and I'm going to show you. So again here, notice it's a little bit challenging, right? Because this is a 3-row by 2 column, and this is a 2 column by 2 rows. So I know my final product is going to be a 3 by 2. So it's going to be a 3 by 2. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 solutions there, okay? And so I've got to be very careful here with how I'm going to do it. So again, I'm going to go with my first row times my first column. And so in this top left box, I'm going to have -1 times -3 plus, and let me give myself more space because I'm going to need it, okay? I'm going to need to give myself a little bit more room to work here. So here's the 3 over here, right? So -1 times -3 plus 3 times -4. And then I'm going to go to the other column, which is going to be the one on the top right. So it's going to be -1 times 2 plus 3 times 1. And again, I'm just not even going to give myself an end here. So it's going to be 3 times 1. Okay? Now I'm going to go to the middle. So now I'm here. I'm going to do the middle row and the first column. So that's going to be 4 times -3 plus -2 times -4. And then the right side is going to be multiplied by this column. So it's going to be 4 times 2 plus -2 times 1. Okay? I'll worry about the math later, right? And then the last one is going to be the last row times the first column. So it'll be 5 times -3 plus 0 times -4. And then when I multiply by the second column, it's going to be 5 times 2 plus 0 times 1. And now I'm able to do the math so I can get the final answer, right? So I'm going to just kind of go here again. -3 times -3 is 3 minus 12. I'll do the math after. The next, I'm going to go down one. I'm going to do -12 plus 8. And the bottom one is -15 plus 0. And then on the other side, I've got -2 plus 3. I've got, I think it's 4 times 2. Let me double check that I did that one right. Yep, 4 times +2. So it's going to be 8 minus 2. And then the bottom is going to be 10 plus 0. Okay, so I did that, right? A lot of work. Not hard work, but a lot of work. And then my final answer is going to be the sum or the difference of those, right? So 3 minus 12 is -9. I'll do the right side. -2 plus 3 is 1. -12 and 8 is -4. 8 minus 2 is 6. -15 and 0 is -15. And 10 and 0 is 10. And so this is the final answer to that problem. That is the product of those two matrices. So it's interesting, right? The pattern, it's weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. But that is how we do it. And again, you just want to make sure that you are prepared and understand what's going on here. Okay. Okay. So then we're gonna go to the next one, and you see here that you have a 2 by 3, and this is a 3 row by 2 column, and so you know that your final answer is going to be a 2 by 2. So I'm going to start over here, okay, and I'm going to end up with a 2 by 2, and I'm going to start with this row, okay, and this column, okay. So it's going to be 1 times -2 plus 0 times 1 plus, let me give myself more room, 3 times -1. Okay, and then I'll go to the next column, and I'll do 1 times, I'll go to this column now, so 1 times 4 plus 0 times 0 plus 3 times 1. Now, again, guys, you don't have to do all this. You could do this in your head. I'm writing it out because, of course, I'm trying to show you how to do it. But obviously, if I was doing this on a test or for myself, I would just do the math. I wouldn't be, writing all this. So now I'm going to this row times the first column. So I'm going to go to the row and the first column. And so, again, I'm going to have 2 times -2. I'm going to have -1 times 1. And I'm going to have -2 times -1. And then I'm going to go and do the right side as well, this right column. And it's going to be 2 times 4 plus -1 times 0 plus -2 times 1. Okay, and so now I have, again, notice my final answer was supposed to be a 2 by 2, and it will be when I do this and this and this and this. I'm going to get a 2 by 2. So I'm going to start doing the math here. So in that first left, -1 times -2 is -2 plus 0 plus -3. I've got -4 minus 1 plus 2. On the right, I've got 4 plus 0 plus 3. And on the bottom, I have 8 plus 0 minus 2. And now all I have to do is do the answers, right? So -2 and -3 and 0 are -5. On the bottom left, -4 and -1 is -5, and 2 is -3. Top right is going to be 7, and bottom right is going to be 6. And so this is the product of those two matrices. The next one, whoops. Okay, so again, perform the indicated operation. If you notice, this is a multiplication. So again, this is a 2 by 2, right, times a 2 by 2. And so this is a multiplication, and my final answer is going to be a 2 by 2 as well. So this time I'm just going to do it more as if I was doing it on my own, right? Like without writing it all out. So I'm going to do 3 times 1 is 3, plus 4 times 0 is 0. Okay? Then I'm going to go to the other column, and I'm going to do 3 times 0 is 0, and 4 times 1 is 4. Then I'm going to go to the bottom, and I'm going to go to the first column, and I'm going to do -2 times 1. -2 times 1 is -2. 5 times 0 is 0. And then I'm going to go to the last column, and I'm going to do -2 times 0 is 0. And 5 times 1 is 5. And when I do the actual math here, I get 3 minus 2, 4, and 5. And this is the solution to this. Okay? And then the last one again here, this is a 3 by 3. And I come to the next one, and this is a 3 by 1. So I know my final answer is going to be a 3 by 1 thing. A 3 by 1 matrix is probably the better word, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this row and this column, and I'm going to do 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2 times 2 is 4, plus 0 times negative 3 is 0, right? Then I go to the next row and this column, and I do 3 by 1 is 3, negative 1 times 2 is minus 2, and 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And then I go to the last row and column, and I do negative 1 times 1 is, or 1 times 1 is 1, 4 times 2 is 8, and 6 times negative 3 is minus 18. And now I just have to add those together. And so I'm going to get 6 plus 4 plus 0 is 10. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 minus 6 is minus 5. And 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 minus 18 is minus 9. And this is the solution, or the product. And again, it makes sense because I know that I'm supposed to end up with a 3 by 1. Okay, so last two that I have to do here. Again, this is a 1 by 3. This is a 3 by 1. So at the end, I'm going to end up with a 1 by 1. So I take this row and this column, right? And so I do 1 times 2 is 2, plus negative 2 times 1, negative 1 is 2, and negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. And I do the math. That's all that's left, right? There's nothing else. So 4 minus 3 is 1. And so that's my solution. And last but not least, here I have 3 rows by 1 column. And here I have 1 row by 3 columns. So I'm going to end up with a 3 by 3 in the end. Okay. The problem with this one is not coming up with the correct numbers. It's coming up with the correct placement for those numbers. Okay, it's easy to figure out what those numbers should be. However, it's going to be a bit of a problem. Remember that when you are doing your work, right, you start with this row and everything in this column. And so, and then you add, you know, if there were other things in the column, but there's not. So your first one is going to be 2 times 1 is 2. And that's, you know, the issue. So the question is, what do we do next? You know, do we do, what goes here? You know, is it 2 by negative 2? Or is it negative 1 by, let's say, 1 or whatever? Where do we put the next thing? And so that's why this is going to be the trickiest of them all. So think of it more like a distributive property question in this sense, and this might help a little bit more figuring out the order. So the first one I'm going to do is 2 by 1, which is 2. And then I'm going to do 2 by negative 2, which is negative 4, and 2 by negative 3, which is negative 6. Then I'll go to the next one, and I'll start again. First column, negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. And then it's like a distributive. If it doesn't work for everything, but for this particular one where the order's so weird, just think of it in that way. Okay, that's going to be the order for placing these answers. So that's a 2 there, and that's a 3. And then again, I'm going to go to this last one, and I'm going to do 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times negative 2 is minus 2, and 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. And that's going to be the answer for my matrices. Those are going to be, that's my product. Again, I end with a 3 by 3. But it does get a little bit confusing because, you know, we're more used to, you know, when the columns have more in them. You know, we're used to the idea that we're going to do, you know, 2 times 1, and then there's going to be some other number here, which is going to be multiplied and things like that. And so it's a little bit more of a challenge. The 1 by 3 above isn't so difficult because that one, you're only going to get a 1 by 1 anyway. And so it's just a lot easier to do it. For whatever reason, it's just a simpler process. The reverse is a little bit more complicated. So again, that's your answer for this problem. And that's the final for this section. This is all you're going to be expected to do with matrices. You're going to either be expected to add them, subtract them, multiply them, and I think that with the skills you have now, you can do it. And again, you're also going to get those where, you know, it's like 3 times the matrix A or whatever. Everything in this video is a possible question on an assessment.